Today, as we celebrate the Transfiguration of Christ and imagine the divine Christ between Moses and Elijah on Mount Tabor, we have a lot of questions that pop up. What does this mean for us today? Why is this such an important and I would say almost vital part of the story? Blessings in light to everyone out there. Hello, my name is Charlie. I am a non-binary sci-fi fantasy writer. Today, we are celebrating the memorial of the Transfiguration of Christ. This is a story that we can find in the New Testament and is one that has inspired mystics and visionaries throughout the history of Christianity. I think we'll find very impactful in our own discussion today. I'm joined by my wonderful husband, Brian.
Good day.
This is a big, deep, meaty topic. I'm glad that it's on the calendar every year because this entire podcast could just be about this one moment. And we could do 7 days a week, hours and hours a day, and not exhaust everything that happened. If you're not familiar with the story, it's very simple. Jesus and three of his disciples, Peter, John, and Andrew, go up on a mountain to pray. They wake up in the middle of the night and there's a blinding light on the top of Mount Tabor. They look over and there is the fully divine Christ sitting on the mountain talking with Moses and Elijah. And they really don't know what to do. In fact, I believe it's Peter who said, "Should we make up tents for our guests?" And Jesus is like, "No, but thanks for asking." It's this moment that kind of happens and passes. It seems almost an interjection into the story. What actually happened here? What is the importance of this? On a basic level, the Transfiguration shows us Jesus in the line of prophet and lawgiver. We see him with Moses, the quintessential lawgiver, the one to whom the Torah was given, that all of the commandments were given, and we have kind of this reenactment of the events on Mount Sinai. And we have Elijah, the quintessential prophet, a prophet that walked with God so much that he does not die. A great chariot swings low, picks him up and carries him away into heaven. So again, the quintessential prophet.
Just a quick little side note in here, because it kind of cracks me up. Elijah is also very much about lessons of hospitality. It just cracks me up that the first default thought was hospitality, with proposing, do we need to build a tent or set up a tent for them, even though non-corporeal doesn't necessarily need a tent. But hospitality first, it just cracks me up, and is always a great lesson to take in everything, that one's default thought should be hospitality. Just cover your bases.
We have these three very important people who are all attributed to these three mountain experiences. We have Jesus on Mount Tabor, we have Moses from Mount Sinai, and we have Elijah, who is very connected with Mount Carmel. In fact, it's on Mount Carmel that Elijah sees God. One of the most powerful passages in all of Scripture, and a story we will be referring to a lot forever, and should probably do a full episode on at some point. God walks by, and there are three things that happen. There was a mighty wind, but God was not in the wind. There was a fire, and God was not in the fire. And there was an earthquake, and God was not in the earthquake. And then a still small voice came to Elijah. I've always found this image very powerful in that when we think of Moses on Mount Sinai, we think of this big booming voice, right? For those of us of a certain age, we go back to a certain Charlton Heston movie. "I am the Lord your God," right? It's a very booming voice, which is very much associated with the law. Loud, booming, declarative voice. And Elijah, who heard the still, small voice, the quiet voice. And there, in between the two, is Jesus the Christ. in the fullness of his glory. Now, we can get into some of the theological questions and stuff that come around with this moment, but to me, the most important lesson I learned from here is the Christ as the pivot point between these two things. The law, which is quite literally, for Moses, written in stone. The 10 declarations, or as they're often said in English, the 10 commandments, literally carved into stone. And Elijah, the prophet, the justice maker, the one who engages in good trouble, the most prolific slaughterer of people in the entire scripture, which is why people like me always speak of Elijah with great reverence, because people who are familiar with the story of Elijah and the prophets of Baal, they say their prayers, and when Elijah brings fire down on his stack and the prophets of Baal don't, Elijah then pulls a sword and kills 500 prophets of Baal. We'll talk about that later. Elijah's a bit scary, and in legend becomes increasingly scary, because Elijah, having never died, occasionally shows back up in stories and is always there to, as Brian said, judge the hospitality of the place that he goes to. Woe unto you if Elijah finds you wanting. The prophets are the voices of justice. The law is not always about justice. I think this is where we get things confused. The law is about righteousness. When we are talking about the law, we're talking about what is right and what is wrong. We're talking about ethical codes, moral codes, how you should govern yourself and how you should govern a society. That's what the law is. The law is not interested in justice. It should be the embodiment of justice. It should be written justly. But a human actor has to make justice happen.
I like to think of the law as it's like any structure, whether that's a building, a wall, a door. It exists, it gives structure and form to the environment, but it is not necessarily just. It is not necessarily right or wrong. That wall will obstruct passage and flow of air and everything else, good or bad. But it does give structure.
Continuing this trend that we've been on this month with the podcast, talking about peace and peacemaking, there we have Jesus in the middle. And I feel like this is the embodiment of both the lawgiver and the prophet. As Jesus famously said in the Sermon on the Mount, not one jot or tittle, not one little dot or line, which shall pass from the law until all is fulfilled. What is the law? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and spirit, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The law is love. But this is very rigid. It is love, not hate, not anger, not fear. And he walks this line between the lawgiver, which we see on the Sermon on the Mount, and the prophet, who is going about interfering with injustice. There's a person about to be stoned, and he says, okay, that's what the law demands. This person be stoned. So whoever is without sin cast the first stone. That makes you have to stop for a minute and look at the harshness of the law. Jesus is constantly pointing at the harshness of the law. Why is there divorce according to Jesus? Because of the hardness of our own heart. Because we enter into relationships that maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we're mean to each other. We're cruel to each other. There are many, many reasons for a marriage to end. But if we were perfect embodiments of love and compassion, there would be no need for divorce. We would find the person that we loved and we would love them, and it would be a perfect love, and romance novels, happy ever afters, would be ubiquitous for all. But that's not who we are as a species. So many of us have that hardness of heart. Relationships break and they fall apart. Jesus is bringing about this new modality, this new way of acting, in that we are told not to judge. Judge not, lest you be judged, for you shall be judged by the same measure that you yourself apply. Oh, this is why I personally don't care what people get up to in their personal lives. But if they're always harping about morality and getting into everybody else's sex lives, and they have a messy one themselves, I find myself talking about it. Because I don't really care what most people are doing in their privacy of their own lives. But you keep saying that you are some paragon of justice. Now I care. It's the hypocrisy that makes me care. And we are judged by the standards that we apply. There's also a second part of that. This is where prophecy, being able to see the divine, be able to participate in those divine energies, really comes to the forefront. Jesus tells us to not try to take the mote out of our brother's eye before we take the log out of our own. What's all that about? Well, the evils that we impute to others are often, not always, but often the flaws we see in ourselves. We're often projecting our own insecurities, fears, inadequacies, lapses onto others. And in so, we're telling on ourselves. I'll be quite honest. I talk a lot about compassion and our need for compassion because that is not something that comes natural to me. Compassion is something I had to learn and actively practice. I would not say that I am perfect at it. One, I don't believe that anybody's perfect at anything, but I have rage in me. I have anger in me. I'm not somebody who holds grudges. That's not the way that I act. But if I am not careful in monitoring who I am and how I'm interacting with people, compassion isn't always the place that I operate from. I see this as a failing in myself and thus project out. We need compassion. We need compassion. You see this in John Lennon. John Lennon also had this problem in one of his most famous songs, right? All you need is love. Because, yeah, this is a flaw he saw in himself that he tried to make better and tried to get better. In his case, I think it is something that he did improve on over time.
It is in this as well that we can glean a useful motivational tool. It is in our nature to want to judge others for things. Using that desire, that urge, sublimating that energy into and redirecting it back into yourself, to use that as energy to give yourself fuel for self-improvement is quite a powerful tool. Often when driving, I find myself being like, oh, this person's being a jerk, or don't drive like a expletive. I tend to get worked up by other drivers. On my better days, I take a moment, take that breath for peace and let it go. And then I also remember to take that energy that was built up in wanting to judge others, to reflect it back upon myself and realize, why am I driving as fast as I'm driving? Why am I cutting these people off? Why did I just change lanes 5 times between 2 stoplights? It's unnecessary. It's excessive. I'm the one driving like a jerk. I'm the one cutting people off. I'm the one driving too fast. And whether I am, quote unquote, driving safer, it's not for the debate at that point in time. It's a lame excuse. I need to fix myself first. Using that as motivation is helpful in fixing myself because it's stuff that I want to excuse. I like doing that. I like going fast. That's fine, but I need to use it to stop myself from judging others and redirect that energy so that until I'm driving calmly and sanely and not like a jerk, I cannot judge others on that.
Mount Tabor really is the place where we start confronting a lot of this. A lot of early Christian mysticism is based off of this image here. It is as important to Christian mysticism as Ezekiel's vision of the divine chariot is in Jewish mysticism. It is pivotal to this. And there on Mount Tabor, we see the Shekhinah glory of God, the light shining that we are told was in the tabernacle when they were wandering through the desert. This Shekhinah that filled the temple when it was initially blessed by Solomon. This light, this glory of God, the kovod, the glory, the chashmal of God is there in their presence. It's terrifying because in the bright, unyielding light, there's nowhere to hide. All of your faults are laid bare. All of your imperfections are laid bare. If you wonder why your favorite newscaster, podcaster starts using soft light more and more and more as time goes on, because soft light doesn't show wrinkles. The softer the light, the less likely you are to see the effects of aging, right? Harsh light, bright light, shows all imperfections. If there's the slightest wrinkle in your clothes, the harsh light will show it. And that really is the experience. Why the tremendous and fascinating mystery when you encounter the divine that shakes us to our core is you realize there's nothing to hide. There's nowhere to hide. There's nothing that you can cover up here. This is what the apostles are seeing. The apostles are the stand-ins for us in this moment where they're just like, guys, Moses and Elijah are here. And Jesus is kind of glowing. There's light everywhere. It's important for us to realize there's always light everywhere. You glow. I glow. It's subtle. It's soft. Our eyes don't pick up on it well because it is so faint. But one of the things that we know because of the nature of our bodies and the way the chemistry, the biology, and the physics work within them, every human glows. Just biologically glows. We don't have to get into subtle matter and all of the things, spiritual things here. You glow. There is a light about you. I would also agree with Yoda. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. That light is always around us. And in that light, we realize that we are all intrinsically the same. We are all striving for a life that is free of sorrow, that is full of joy, that grants us a sense of fulfillment. And we might not all pick the best or even the right way to do it, but we all have that commonality that unifies us in spirit and in reality. Staring at this image, and I highly recommend you just take some time in meditation and just imagine it for yourself. You can use a picture if that helps you find your favorite painting. There are millions of them probably of this scenario because it is such a famous moment from the Gospels. Or just allow your imagination to be what it is. Let Moses look like whatever you want Moses to look like. Let Elijah look like whatever you want Elijah to look like. Let Jesus look like whatever you want Jesus to look like. Let the mountain look like whatever you want it to look like. You don't need to go and find Mount Tabor on Google Earth and see what the actual landscape looks like. Just let yourself be in the moment. What arises for you? What does this look like to you? And how do you feel in that light, in that place, as this great illumination, this base illumination is flowing up, where the one life is erupting like a fountain into the world, reminding us that the true path that we walk is not the righteous path of the law, the justice-making path of the prophet. It's that path in the middle. It is that middle way, that place in between where we have to not only remember the letter of the law, but the spirit. What is the justice that needs to be done here? What is the goodness that needs to be done here? What is the truth that needs to be done here? We're not always looking for that booming, loud Cecil B. DeMille voice of God booming from the heaven. Which, by the way, if you really want to see how good he was at making that happen, he actually made a silent film version of the Ten Commandments before he made the Charlton Heston Yul Brynner one. It's a silent film, and you will actually understand a line from the Torah very profoundly, and it says that their eyes heard, they saw the voice of God, because there's no sound. It's a silent film. But he does such a good job in conveying the imagery there. You can hear the thunder, you can hear the lightning, you can hear the booming voice, which is a sign of just how good he was as a filmmaker. This is a moment foundational to our mysticism, to our, I'm going to use the bad R word, religion. Remember, I use religion in the Roman sense of the term. It's religio. It is the link, what links us back, what links us again, what links us together. In this moment, we see the tradition. We see Moses, we see Elijah, we see the Christ. We see the future. There's Peter, John, and James. We see the future, the past, and the present, all together in one place. We're forced to start asking ourselves, what is our future? What is our past? What traditions are we going to hold on to? This is really the power of the prophets. The prophets are the pruning shears of faith when you actually look at the Hebrew prophets, right? You read the law of Moses, and the law of Moses is very clear. we use this knife to kill this animal and use this ladle to put this blood on this altar. Step by step instructions on how sacrifice works. And then we get to the prophets, and through the mouth of the prophets, hear the voice of the Lord. I do not want your sacrifice. I want your love. That is a pruning shear being taken to the faith. That is a pruning shear being taken to the law. The law is very clear. On this day, we bring these animals to this place to do these things. Blum, 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 blum.
For me, it was one of the greatest revelations when going through different traditions and looking at everything. It was recognizing there is the core. There are those few things, and it should be very few things, that are essential. Like in life, you have to eat, you have to drink water, you have to breathe. There are those essential things. Those are the things that you allow to be your law. But everything else is personal practice. That is the prophetic element. That is the justice-making element. And it's recognizing that is personal. And you can share the other trappings with others through the different traditions that link you back. It's not essential. It doesn't matter. The ladle you use is not core. Sacrifice is not core. It's the love. That's core. That needs to be in all of it. But the rest. And the prophets help to prune that and help to put into context that, oh, this is not essential.
As we said at the very beginning, what was the law that Jesus came? Oh, Master, what is the greatest commandment?
You will love God with all your heart, mind, and being, and you will love your neighbor as yourself.
And there it is.
Because how the hell can you love somebody else if you don't love yourself? There you go. It's also very profound.
It's very true.
It's very true.
That is the core of everything that we're doing. And when you ask yourself, how do you love God with all your heart, mind, and spirit? Again, God is our aliveness. We are called to live God. God is our aliveness.
Inner radiance.
Love being alive. Love your aliveness. Live to the best of your ability, and you are showing that love and affection for God. That is what we really see here, this just fount of life pouring forth on Mount Tabor. We bask in the radiance of that Taboritic light. And this is something that a lot of Christian mystics talk about. And if you've ever experienced this in meditation, it is such a profound experience that occasionally there you are, you're sitting with your eyes closed in deep meditation, and you just find yourself surrounded by light. It's just there. It didn't suddenly appear. It was always there. You just didn't see it. We distract ourselves so much. And I think one of the more interesting things is we see this conversation in the Gospels between Jesus, Moses, and Elijah. I want to bring that challenging moment up here. Was that really a one-time thing? Or is everything that Jesus did a conversation between him, Moses, and Elijah? Between him, the law, and the prophets? Was just that one moment where everything was just right enough that the veil slipped and people could see that discourse happening? Because from my point of view, yeah, this was just that moment where it was visible, not a unique moment in time. I think you can see that discourse on the Mount of Olives later in the story, and you can see it on the Sermon on the Mount earlier in the story. You can see it all the way through. You can see it in Jesus when he is assaulted by the man possessed by many demons, and Elijah comes out in him and he wrestles him to the ground and casts the demons out.
It's in the moment of the fishes and the loaves, just before the fishes and the loaves, when the community has brought the problem before Christ, and Jesus has that moment, because the law says cast them out. You can weed that crowd down really easily. Prophet says, hospitality says feed them all, or feed as many as you can.
So as we sit here remembering the Transfiguration, this moment where we get to see this glimpse of the divine Christ, the cosmic Christ, the one who Paul tells us holds the cosmos together. Hold that vision in our minds and really ask ourselves how we can participate with it, how we can find more moments of that divine light, and how we can walk this path between the law and the prophets. more fully in our daily lives. I hope you've gotten something out of this. I hope that something we have said has moved something in you. We would love to hear from you. You can reach out to us through our community over at Substack. Just go to creationspast.com and click on the chat tab. You can leave your questions, comments, and anything there. You can also comment on this post over there and keep the comments over there, however you want to do it. You can also reach out to me. I am creationspast.com on Blue Sky and creationspast over on Threads and Instagram. But we'd love to talk to you about this and answer any questions you might have. If there's any way that you can help support us and keep us doing what we're doing, you can join our community over at creationspast.com. For all of our paid members, there are classes coming that will be first behind the paywall so that we can make sure that we're giving special attention to those who are taking them and make sure we're answering any questions that are asked and everything, but they will go out to the wider community later. So don't worry about it if you don't have the money right now. Don't hurt yourself. Never hurt yourself in giving to us or anybody else. They're going to go wide afterwards. We're just going to start with the paid audience and then spread out from there.
And if you're hungry for knowledge, there is wisdomscry.com, which has a lot of wonderful information and articles on a wide, incredibly wide variety of topics and an ever-growing treasure trove of knowledge and information as more and more articles go up regularly.
Thank you so much for being here. And as always, may the blessings and light of God ever shine upon you, that you may find the path that you should walk. Amen.
Amen.